Welcome back to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. Roman is back.
What's going on, guys?
Colin is here again.
Hello.
And we are talking about, well, all sports today, really.
Yeah.
And it's kind of about, the question that me and Jack were talking about was about Portland. And the question being, what do you do when your team is good enough to be competitive every year, but you don't have the pieces to ever win a championship? What do you do in that scenario? From a business standpoint, we can look at it from other stakeholders, like the fan perspective. But, what do you do when you're just right on the cusp, but you're never going to be good enough to win the championship with the players you have?
I'd like to start.
Please.
So we were talking about this before we started recording. When Jacob posed this podcast idea, my initial answer was coaching. And yeah, we could talk about Portland. One example I want to bring up of coaching is the Toronto Maple Leafs. For the past 3 years, we've arguably had a team that could contend for a deep playoff run. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say, right? But for the past 3 years, we've ran into Boston twice and the Capitals. But what I want to say about coaching is that, you can have a really, really good team, especially like how the Leafs have had and how the Leafs currently have, but just because you have a good team doesn't mean it will work. And the finger that I point is to coaching. And we had Matthews, we have Marner, all these really talented players. You got a really good roster, but I think it comes down to coaching and the scheme and the whole identity of the team. Does that make sense? The team identity, sense. Right? What is
the culture?
The culture. What are you good at? You can point. You should be able to point to a team and be like, your identity is this. You guys, this is your bread and butter. And for the Leafs, it seems just like even last year in the playoffs, Mike Babcock took a lot of shit for not utilizing his stars. And I agree. He did not use Matthews as well as he could have. He only played him, I think, 7 minutes in the third period in Game 7 against Boston, something stupid like that. Coaching is, I think, super underrated. You can have such a good team, but if the right coach with the right scheme and the right game plan isn't there, you're not going to succeed.
Here's where I kind of disagree what you're saying. You know what? Let me word it differently. I think you're right about the coaching. I think your example is wrong because the Leafs have the roster to win the Stanley Cup, but the coaching is throwing them off. And I think Mike Babcock should have been fired again last season, and I definitely think he should be fired right now because it's not looking good.
That's fair enough.
But what I'm more concerned about is when the team isn't quite there. So let's look at the Utah Jazz. Phenomenal team. They've done a great job bolstering themselves over the summer. Mm-hmm. But that team is not going to win with the Clippers and the Lakers around. And it's definitely not going to win when Golden State resurge next season.
Mm-hmm. Nope.
So even if the coaching is great, maybe it isn't, but I'm saying the team isn't there. What do you do when that's the case? Because, okay, let's look. My good example is the Raptors. Because the Raptors with DeRozan and Lowry, they weren't ever going to win a championship.
All-star backcourt.
Never, ever winning a championship with DeRozan. Maybe not, but they weren't winning. Maybe not never, ever, but they weren't going to win, right?
Especially, I want to interrupt you.
So, let me just finish the point. Let me just finish the point. So, realizing this, Masai Ujiri decides to trade for Kawhi Leonard for 1 year. Because you know what? This is the big move that maybe puts him over the line. And a new coach, Nick Nurse, a formidable coach, proven beyond doubt
Proven overseas. Season,
he
coached a lot in Europe.
Proven beyond doubt this season how incredible of a defense-minded coach he is. Right? Mm-hmm. So, in that sense, it's down to coaching, and it's also down to the big splash, the big risk on Kawhi Leonard to come play for you for a rental season. But the payoff, tremendous. But do you take that risk with your team? Because the Raptors could have been, top 3 in the East for years and years and years and years, but they probably would have won a championship with DeRozan. But you take that big leap of faith, and sometimes, like with the Raptors, it pays off. But it also comes down to coaching, because I don't think they would
I
have
don't think
won
we would've
without
won-
Nick Nurse.
I don't think we would have won with Dwayne Casey. Even if we had kept...
No.
I think if we had kept Dwayne Casey but still made the Kawhi trade...
I agree.
I don't
agree.
think we
No.
would have gone to the finals.
100% I agree. 100% I agree. So it is coaching, but it's also, you know, for the Leafs, I get what you're saying, but the example, like the Leafs are good enough to win with their team. But like Portland, the Utahs, those kind of teams, they aren't going to win with what they have.
I think
you can even say that about the Boston Celtics. That team's not going to win an NBA championship.
No.
I think, like, all the points that we're making here are valid, but I think, like, it all comes down to each individual circumstance, right? Like, the Utah Jazz, yeah, they have a good team. They've got a good head coach, but I think the reason why they're not going to win is because of the circumstance they're in right now. And that's the fact that the West is stacked, and there are just, like, we've said that they're among the top 4 teams in the West, but there are teams like the Clippers and the Lakers, they have that piece that'll put them over the edge. The Kawhi Leonards, the Anthony Davises, the LeBron Jameses, the Paul Georges of the world. And I think with that, a lot of it is circumstance. Like, the Jazz aren't going to win the finals because they're just in a loaded conference. But like with any example that we bring up, it like there's a bunch of other factors you could take into consideration, right? Like the Leafs, like I said, coaching, but you also said, anyways, like I think, yeah, I don't
The
know.
roster.
Yeah, sorry, but like each individual like team, like it's, I don't think you can point to just one thing and say like this needs to change. I think there's a bunch of outside like external factors that you can't really control, like LeBron James dominating the East for so many years.
But I'll finish point.
Yeah, like LeBron James dominating the East, like the Western Conference being so loaded, there's not much you can do about it. Yes, there are things you can do internally to try and solve those issues, but there are also things externally that you cannot have any control over.
Okay, so recognize, business standpoint, recognizing the fact that these outside factors are out of your control from you winning an NBA championship. So you just have that roster just sitting in purgatory, right in the middle. They're going to be competitive, but they're never going to be the great team. They're never going to be a bad team. They're just going to sit right in the middle.
Yeah.
But you analyze that you can't
change any of the other things.
You can't become the next level. You just sit there. Like, what do you do with that team?
Yeah.
You just let them sit in that buffer zone?
If we're gonna talk strictly basketball, for me, it comes down to coaching and your top player. Because
yeah, you're right. But like, I want to get specifically what you would do. So put yourself in either Portland GM shoes or Utah GM shoes. What do you do with your team, knowing that these
considering all the outside factors,
noting that you can't change the outside factors, all you can do is control your organization, and what you've deemed is that this roster will not win the championship.
Like when you put it like that, the only real thing you can do is coaching and adding pieces to your team. Like,
you can only add so many pieces, though.
Utah had a great offseason, arguably the best offseason, but it's still not enough.
But that, like, it could just be not enough because it's just not enough because the West is so stacked. Like, I think if the Jazz are gonna be like, look, we need to, what?
No, you're dodging the question. You keep saying the reasons. I'm asking you, what would you do as the Jazz? I don't care about the other stuff. You know you can't control everything. You can control only the Jazz. What do you do as the GM of the Jazz right now?
Trade for a higher top talent, I guess.
How would you do that?
Who are you gonna trade?
I don't know. I'm not a GM.
But this is the topic. This is what we're talking about.
It's $1 million question.
It's a tough question.
Okay, all right, okay. I am the GM of the Jazz now.
Do you want me to answer first?
Can I answer first? Even though I've been beating around the bush, I'm gonna answer next.
Stay on point.
Cool.
Yes,
okay.
answer.
If I'm the GM of the Utah Jazz right now, I target a star player on a poor team.
Who?
Devin Booker.
Devin Booker.
Thank you.
Or maybe like
Devin Booker's bad.
Or maybe like a Julius Randle.
Because shooting guard, you already have one.
Maybe a Julius Randle or.
I thought Julius Randle and
You don't think Julius Randle would help with the Jazz right now?
He would help them, but he's
not to the extent that you need.
Okay, but
not that all-star
but I'm saying I would target a star player on a poor team to help my team out. Like I don't like that sounds so just like cliche and basic, but like
Can you throw like a Blake Griffin or a Drummond into that then?
Blake Griffin or
Not
Drummond?
Drummond. You got Rudy Gobert.
Blake Griffin.
If we're talking Portland.
Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin.
Okay.
Both those teams could use Blake Griffin. Both those teams could use
Portland
I don't think they need
two
Drummond,
pieces.
but both those teams could use Blake Griffin.
Portland can use Drummond.
But is
Portland
Blake
already has
Griffin,
two centers.
Let's
Two good centers.
Better than both.
Let's imagine Utah Jazz. Conley, Mitchell, Bogdanovich, Blake Griffin, Rudy Gobert. Does that team win the West next year when the Warriors are amazing again? When the Lakers are still good, if not better? When the Clippers are good, if not better?
I don't know. What would you do?
Here's what I would do. You have to recognize that, this isn't the team. Unfortunately, you got good in the wrong era. The Jazz have been, the Jazz have been in this situation before. They had Stockton and Malone.
Never won a chip.
But they were in the Jordan era. You weren't going to win.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan was coming at you every year, right? You were good in the wrong time. Right place, wrong time, let's call it. Okay? So you have to recognize that this is the case. What you can do is remain competitive for a few years because the Jazz haven't been this good since the Stockton era, really. So I would let this play out because you know what? In the case, an ankle injury, whatever, like you come up against the Lakers conference final, like somehow you get there. Somebody goes down, AD goes down. All of a sudden, maybe you find yourselves in the final. Who knows from there, especially if you win the West. Look at the Raptors. They grinded out, got to the final. KD's hurt. Take advantage, win your championship. So maybe I can play that for a while.
But
maybe I can add pieces.
Okay, but those are external factors. You asked me what I would do.
What I would do though is play with what I have currently. Maybe obviously try to improve every year. But at a certain point, just when you're at the top of the roller coaster, right when you're about to start plummeting. You start resetting. Look at Oklahoma. Whole resale. But look at the future in terms of the picks they have because they completely reset that franchise. Sure, they could have kept Russ, and sure, they could have added pieces and come 6, 7, 8s in the West this season, right? But a full reset, and that team looks like they're going to be competitive in a while, and for a while with these pieces because they draft well. So you sit on the good roster that you have, and maybe you grind it out. You be competitive for a while. Business-wise, it's going to be great. Fan turnout's going to be great. You're going to be competitive. You're going to win a lot of games. But you're not going to win a championship, which is the ultimate goal. So what you do right when you're about to start declining, offload, wholesale, get the young pieces, get the picks to make your team, and you run at it. You run that back 3 years later. But you take 3 years off.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but from what I just gathered there is if you were the GM of these teams, you would do A, nothing, or B, trade everyone. That's what I just gathered.
I would do A. I would do nothing for a certain amount of time before I reset. Because business-wise, your team's going to be great. Look at the Raptors. We didn't expect them to win the championship last year. But we were happy watching them be competitive every year, especially because they were atrocious for so long. But we were happy watching them compete. It was frustrating losing to LeBron. Frustrating losing to the Wizards. But it was way better than what we had seen. And you know what? If they just, the players started preaching, they reset, okay, you know what? The team wasn't there, but we, what an enjoyable period of time to enjoy this team. So from a fan standpoint, you have to enjoy it. And from business standpoint, seats are getting filled. Business is booming, right? You get deals. Maybe you try to improve. Obviously you try to improve, but that's you can only do so much. Was the talent that's in the NBA and the super teams that are in the NBA right now. But once you realize it's not going to work anymore, maybe even a little bit before that, so your players still have value. You reset and you start from the beginning, and you hope that this time you do get the championship caliber team. And you run it back. But from the point, the purgatory situation that the Trailblazers find themselves in, that the Utah Jazz find themselves in, they're not going to win an NBA championship. So be competitive, but unfortunately, it's not going to happen, right? And even though Portland got to the conference finals last year, they were no match. And they're up by 15 plus in games 2, 3, and 4, but still, right? They got swept. They got swept.
That yeah, I don't agree with the points you're making, but that comes back to my point of what what more can you do when you've already feel like you've done that much, right? Like
That's what I
you've
mean.
already bolstered your roster. You have the pieces, and that comes back to my point of coaching, right? Like coaching is.
Sorry, let me just interrupt. If I'm the Utah Jazz, and my problem's been scoring for however many years, the scoring has let you down in the playoffs every year. Your defense is fine. Right now, the scoring is still a problem, even though they've bolstered with Mike Conley and Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
Mike Conley's been awful, but
not
in
great.
this exact scenario, coaching change, because the scoring is the problem. The guy's gonna get you.
Yeah,
points.
for me, the majority of the cases that we could bring up, like there are a bunch of other factors, but for the majority of the cases that like we could think of for this scenario, like coaching is always one thing that you like. It's a big risk, but it's a risk. But it's like a thing you can do at any point, right? Like you can trade for players, but there's a certain point where you can't, and that's your team.
Yeah.
But for coaches, you can change your like coaches aren't locked down the same way that players are. Like coaches, you can let one go and then bring one in the next day, right? Like, but obviously they're all NBA coaches and they have different styles, but you need to find a coach that fits the. What's I'm looking for? That fits the assets that your team has and fits the skill set and the identity that you're trying to go for. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the Utah Jazz right now, like we all know them as like a dominant defensive team, but the scoring isn't quite there, right? Like
it's let them down playoff series after
playoff
series.
Like their defense is phenomenal, but their scoring is sometimes subpar, and that is one thing where you could attribute, right? Like they made the change to get Mike Conley. They brought him
Bogdanovich.
Bogdanovich. They brought him.
I think Bojan Bogdanovich.
Anyways, brought in the older Bogdanovich brother.
They're not brothers.
They're just. I don't think they're
Not
related.
brothers.
They're not related.
I don't even think they're related.
They're not related at all.
Oh.
Bojan Bogdanovich on Utah and Bogdanovich on Sacramento are not related in any way.
But they have one letter difference in their entire name, or two.
2-letter difference.
Doesn't matter, man.
I just think that's funny. But anyways, the Utah Jazz added all the two of these assets to improve their scoring, right? They identified their need for a point guard. They didn't get much productivity out of Ricky Rubio. Well, they did, but not what you would like in terms of a scoring. So they got out and went and got Mike Conley. Great. They needed a better wing. They got Bogdanovich, also a scoring wing. And as of right now,
underrated, by the way. He puts up 20 points a game.
He had a nasty game winner a couple games ago too.
Yeah.
And you can do all those moves, but if it's not working, the one place I look to is the coaching and the system. That's just me.
But I think you're right. I think you're right. The coaching is a big difference. Like you obviously saw the Raptors. There's the change just from the coach, but again,
you could even see the
coaching does so much in the NBA. At the end of the day, the NBA comes down to players. Tyronn Lue, not that good of coach, but
he had LeBron.
He had LeBron. So they won a championship.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not coaching all you want, but then LeBron James,
top tier talent.
Kawhi Leonard,
top tier talent.
The coaching, but renders ineffective.
The point I want to make is for the Raptors, we've obviously watched Raptors for a long time. I can recall watching Dwayne Casey for 5 seasons. I love Dwayne Casey, but watching 5 seasons of Dwayne Casey and then 1 season of Nick Nurse, I would disregard the acquisition of Kawhi Leonard. The way the team plays, the system, the identity, their charisma on the court was so much different with Nick Nurse than they were with Dwayne Casey. The one big outlier I would look at with Dwayne Casey was I didn't like how late in games he would turn to hero ball.
Yeah.
Lowry, go get
ISO ball.
ISO.
Oh man,
Lowry isolation at the top of the 3-point line. DeRozan drive to the bucket with 3 defenders on you. I hated that.
I hated ISO ball.
I hated
bro.
every single second of that. But you can see all of the personnel was pretty much the exact same. You're flip-flopping Leonard for DeRozan. But I'm saying the system and the way that the team plays was so much different, and they just looked like a better team. They looked like a different, better team when they had Nick Nurse.
I like this point. I think you're right. Let's say you switch your coach, you've exhausted the roster in terms of they're at their point of depreciation where they're going to start getting worse. but you've already made your coaching switches, maybe one, maybe two. What happens, when you realize, you've changed coaches, it's still not going to happen? Then you reset?
Keep the coach, reset the players.
Reset the players. Exactly, you reset. You get the coach in the rebuild, involve him in your system, involve him in the rebuild so you get the players that are going to tailor to his system, right?
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. But at what point does that happen,
Yeah,
So it's a tough question. It's not.
And the
easy.
thing with
It's a million-dollar
coaching
question.
is coaching all comes down to front office and owner. And in many circumstances, the front offices and the owners didn't play a high level of basketball. I don't think I'm wrong to say that. But, obviously, it's not the case every time. But,
Usually.
marginally, it's, the front office, the people who make the decisions for the team, especially the coaching, because, obviously, the front office handles the coaching, but the coaching has a say in the players, right? Front office, handles coaching and players, but coaching is, they don't decide on that. The front office and owner. And what I'm saying is that, it's up to them to make those decisions about what they feel is right for their team and for the future. And a lot of those decisions are being made by people who maybe have not had NBA experience. So that's why, you see a lot of coaching changes that go south, right? The New York Knicks, obviously, the New York Knicks aren't a good team, but they brought in David Fizdale because they're he could. I know.
Not Fizdale's fault. They said.
No, it's not. But I'm saying it's 10 games into it's 10 games into the season, and they're already thinking of changing their coach, right?
Poor guy. It's not. Anyways, we're not talking about the Knicks.
But yeah,
Nobody wants to talk about the Knicks.
Yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that coaching it's not up to the players, it's up to the front office, and the front office can sometimes have their judgment impaired because of a number of things, like experience or what they think is right. What the GM thinks is right might not be what everybody else in the organization thinks is right for the team.
Roman, you've been kind of quiet.
I've just been listening to you guys.
What do you
think, Roman?
What would you do? Let's put yourself in this situation. What would you do with your team when you know it's not quite there to win the championship, but it's still a good team?
Well, like we've all been saying, it's the $1 million question that every GM looks for, especially if you're on Portland or Utah. But I don't think it's actually. I agree with what you said, Jacob. It is not terrible just to trade away and just rebuild, especially in the era.
It's not a bad.
In the era of the West right now.
So you agree?
I
with what
agree
I'm
with
saying?
you. Yes.
Yeah, especially in the West, rebuilding
West,
does not look like a bad idea right now.
Well, you can even look.
But the Suns have been doing
You
it.
can
For
even look
years
in the East and look at what Miami's doing right now.
Miami has had Eric Spoelstra since their first chip with Dwayne Wade.
I'm just
I
saying.
think.
No, I
But
don't know exactly.
Spoelstra was there through the LeBron, Bosch, Wade era. Spoelstra's still there now, and they're still a competitive team.
They rebuild, reset, rebuild.
Good draft pick.
The coach.
Good draft pick.
Rebuild.
Keep the coach. If you can find that blue chip, top tier coach, you better hold on to him.
Mm-hmm.
And the Spurs, we were talking about this earlier, the Spurs with Greg Popovich, they found an absolute they won the lottery with Greg Popovich. Greg Popovich has turned Tony Parker into a Hall of Famer. Manu Ginobili into a Hall of Famer. He's even turned Patty Mills into a really good player.
Coaching is huge in any sport. Coaching
I
is
think
massive.
Yeah.
It's more important in some sports than others, and for the NBA, it's not as important as other sports. I think.
What sport would you say is more important?
NFL.
Football.
NFL.
So Belichick.
Coaching is the most. The importance
Football
of a
is
coach,
just different than
the
basketball.
importance of a coach
Well, play calling
is
crap.
the most highlighted in the NFL.
Mhm.
The coach is the most that's the sport where coaching is the most important.
Because in the NFL, the coaches call the plays. They determine that. But it's the same in the NBA. But the NBA, you call plays, but you also do freelance. You have to improvise a bit, right? You can run a play, but you might not get an open shot. Okay, what do you do now? You stop and set up another play?
Yeah.
No, you just improvise with it. You use the collection of the players on the court to figure out how you're going to score. But in the NFL, if the play doesn't work, stop. Play stop, think of a new play. But basketball is different than that. A lot of basketball is improvising.
You could say, as the game's going on in the NFL, we're seeing a lot more QBs that are improvising as the games go on.
But
that's not
it's still.
I'm just
on
saying.
The coach.
I know what you're saying, but that is that's
I understand
more
your point. I'm just saying.
coach Yeah. Anyways,
NBA wise, like
like
obviously it's a tough question.
don't undermine the value of a coach to an
honestly,
NBA team.
if your team is great, like the Jazz, you keep that team for a little bit. And you know what? Like, look at the Raptors. We didn't expect them to win last year, but they did. Maybe it all falls into place for you.
Maybe external factors help you win.
Maybe the stars align and you win that championship. But at some point, while the value is still present, you gotta get use of that value and make your team better for the future.
I'd say
think
that's
that
a
is
good
the end
conclusion there.
of this episode. Thank you again for listening to another episode of the Amateur Hour podcast. This was a good topic.
That was a good topic.
This was a good topic. But if you have any suggestions for a topic that you want to see, send it in at Amateur PDC on Twitter and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Amateur Sports, and come back soon for more daily content.